Hello and welcome to the show that has no name. I am your host, Panyo Basa, and I considered having this be um, like an episode in my Studies in Archaic Buddhism mini-series because the sutta I'm going to read is from the Sutta Nipata and it's probably relatively old. And it has a similar theme to some really old stuff, but I don't have any really good evidence that it's older than like the average sutta in the Sutta Nipata or just in the Pali Tipitaka in general. So I'm just going to read this with maybe a little bit of commentary afterwards. And the sutta is the Salla Sutta, and I don't have what number from the Sutta Nipata is. I wrote my own translation of it in this little book. When I was a monk, I used to have little notebooks and just write stuff in them, including my own translations. And most of the book is, it's like the Awakening of Faith Shastra or something like that. But this Salla Sutta is about death. And I used to want this sutta to be recited at my funeral. In the case of my death, I want it to be recited in Pali and then in whatever language that members of the audience would speak. So in Burma, it'd be in Burmese translation also. And if there were any people that spoke English there, it'd be in English also. And that's one of the reasons why I made this translation, is because it provided an English translation that I approved of that could be read at my funeral. And now that I'm not a monk anymore, it's not that big of a deal, but I guess it's still suitable because I'm still going to die like everybody else, as you will find out from this sutta. But before I start reading, I'd just like to tell everyone that I'm sitting next to a lake or a little reservoir that I'm not sure what the name is, and I'm in Paris Mountain State Park, which is just a few miles away from where we live. And there's a turtle right out there. There's a great big turtle right out there in the water. I can see it from here, which is nice. Turtles are nice. I like turtles. But that turtle also is going to die, as you will find out when I read this. The Discourse on the Spike, or the Salla Sutta. The life of mortals here is signless and uncertain. It is troublesome and brief, and it is bound to unease. Indeed, there is no means by which those born do not die. Even for one who has reached a great old age, there is death, for such is the way of living beings. Just as for ripe fruit there is always danger of falling, even so for mortals who are born there is constantly danger of death. And just as clay bowls made by a potter all end in breaking, even so is the life of mortals. Young and old, those who are foolish and those who are wise, all go under the power of death. All are destined for death. When they are overcome by death, going on to the other world, the Father does not give support to the Son, nor do any relatives to any other relatives. See, even as the relatives are looking on, and each of them crying out, each mortal is led away one by one, like a cow to be slaughtered. Thus is the world stricken by death and old age. Therefore the wise do not grieve, having realized the way of the world, whose path you do not know, either whence he has come or where he has gone. Not seeing either end, you lament him pointlessly. If, lamenting, a stupid person who is harming himself would derive some benefit, then a discerning person would do it also. But not by weeping and grief does one attain to peace of mind. One's unease simply increases, and one's body is harmed. One becomes thin and unhealthy looking, harming oneself by oneself. Those who have passed away are not benefited by this. Lamentation is pointless. A fellow not abandoning grief increasingly suffers unease. Bewailing the deceased, he falls under the power of grief. See others also going along, men going in accordance with their actions, living beings floundering about here in the world, having come under the power of death. For in whatever way they imagine it, it happens other than that. The state of separation is such as this. See the way of the world. Even if a man would live 100 years or more, he comes to be separated from the community of his relatives. He leaves behind life in this world. Therefore, having heard the worthy one should dismiss lamentation. Seeing the one who has passed away, the deceased one should think, the deceased, one should think, I can't have him anymore. Just as a burning shelter would be put out with water, even so a wise man, endowed with understanding, an intelligent, skillful man, would quickly blow away any grief that has arisen, as the wind would to a wisp of cotton. Lamentation and longing and one's own unhappiness, one seeking ease for oneself, should pull out the spike in oneself. With the spike pulled out, unattached, having attained peace of mind, gone beyond all sorrow, the sorrowless one is completely gone out. And that's the end of the sutta. And most of it's pretty self-explanatory, although there are a few little comments I would make. One is that the spike, or Salla in Pali, it means anything sharp and pointy that stabs into you. Like a porcupine's quills are also called a Salla. A surgeon's probe, or a lance, like a lancet, is also called a Salla in Pali. And here it's a metaphor for something jabbing into us, especially into our heart, that causes us to be like completely incapable of being totally at ease. It's just driving us just relentlessly, just through this chronic dissatisfaction that just shoves us through life. And the point here is that you pull out that spike and really nothing is a problem anymore, even death itself. And it's a metaphor in older texts, like in the Sutta Nipata, there's reference to the spike, at least two references to the spike. One in the first sutta, and I think one in the very last sutta of the Atthakavagga also are referring to this metaphor of the spike stuck in the heart. Afterwards, it didn't get much use anymore. So in a way, that could be an indication of like more than usual antiquity in a Buddhist text. There is one quote in here also that is a refrain in the Sutta Nipata. I think it's also found in the Atthakavagga, which is, see, in whatever way they imagine, it happens other than that. And here it's kind of referring to death, but in other places it's referring to just life in general, or anything in general. It's like it's not the way you think that it's going to be. And that's really pretty much it, because as I say, it's pretty much self-explanatory. I guess it's appropriate to read a text on death here in a forest or like a natural area, because in nature, death isn't really concealed. You know, it's just out in the open, unless a dead body is like inside the stomach of something else. Like right before I was reading this, an ant walked by on this rock here with a dead fly in its mouth, carrying the fly back to its nest. Well, I just thought I'd read something simple and relatively easy, even though it's a relatively heavy subject. I don't think there's many heavier subjects than death in general, and the fact that we're all going to die. And as a Buddhist, it is a good practice. It's considered to be one of the one of the great protectors is just Marananusati, which is reflection on death and the inevitability of death. Just remind yourself that you're not going to last forever. And I guess that's it. So despite the content of the text, be happy. I hope they get to see the turtle. It's really a nice turtle.